Hello, Schizoids here. Welcome to another session of what I like to call Schizoid Quest, in which we hear the adventures and the story of individual schizoids, in which we list different questions that we want to ask the different schizoids that get on here, just to see the types of answers we receive and to see the unique personalities attached to people who are schizoid in and of themselves. I want to begin by having, should we just go by, is it Faye?
Yeah, Faye.
Faye, okay. Introduce Faye. Well, they will introduce themselves to whatever capacity they wish to do so. So go for it, Faye.
Yeah, so hi, I'm Faye. I'm 25 years old from Germany. I am a human being most of the time, sometimes at least. Um,
Relatable.
I am, yeah, diagnosed with schizoid for 5 years now, roughly. Took me a while to figure out that it was a valid diagnosis. I got diagnosed first with Asperger's syndrome, and I assumed that schizoid was, a misdiagnosis of that, but turns out it was actually the other way around.
Mhm.
And yeah, about a year ago or so, started actually learning about this whole thing. And yeah, I'm also not diagnosed with, but I'm highly suspecting that I have CPTSD, which I can't get diagnosed with since it's not yet a official diagnosis.
Gotcha.
Yeah, that's mostly it really. Not much more to say.
All right, sounds good. That was a lot for Zoid, so no problems. That was a big introduction. um, but yeah, the interestingly enough, the Asperger's thing I've heard a few times already. So in the past from different Zoids about being diagnosed with that. Initially, it's usually the other way around. They get diagnosed with Asperger's and then eventually get diagnosed, I guess properly, if you want to say it like that. Okay,
Yeah.
so let's start. So, first question. Would you describe yourself as a floating head? Do you prefer concepts over objects?
Inside a floating hat, but the floating hat isn't even me. Like I'm just observing the world
Mm.
through my mind, but I don't even identify with my mind very much. So it's all very, very disconnected and very, like looking at it from the outside, not really from the inside. It's more
Uh,
like observations and
Depersonified, right?
experience. Yeah, exactly. And I I don't know if I prefer concepts over objects. I'm better with concepts for sure. My brain is much better at handling them, and oftentimes I will be much more thinking about concepts than I will be thinking about any physical, actual things.
That includes people,
Um,
right?
that absolutely includes people, yes, very much so.
Mhm.
Um, but I do have a certain feeling of like I'd like to care more about objects and not just exist on the plane of concepts. But most of the time, it's just much easier to work with concepts, with thoughts, with abstract things
So you would
than
say
with
you gravitate toward it naturally?
yeah, very much so.
That's where you're most comfortable.
Yeah, it's just much more easy to work with. It's just my brain works on that level almost all the time. And it's oftentimes difficult because I do try to be more, I do think it's healthy for me to be more on the physical reality, not like be in my head all the time and just be
In the tangible?
thinking about concept exactly about the tangible things. But I very much gravitate towards it automatically and I have to put effort into it, effort that I usually don't really want to put in if I want to be on the more, grounded level.
Um, if you don't mind me asking, could you give me, if you can recollect one, an example in which this has occurred, as far as like it maybe negatively impacting your ability to complete a task or an activity, maybe something you can recollect in which that's occurred.
It's more of a generalized feeling, I think,
Hmm.
in the sense that when I spend too much time being like in my head, being thinking about abstract things, then it makes it much, much more difficult to like just do things in general, whether that is something I need to do or something I feel like I should do, which I feel like might be good for me, and just like focusing on that and doing the things that need to be done
Like
tend to
cooking,
become difficult.
cleaning,
Stuff like that,
groceries,
yeah,
basic things.
exactly. Yeah,
What would you find yourself doing instead of those things? If you can give an example of
thinking,
an
really
internal
just
activity.
thinking.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay, that's good. Would you describe yourself as a minimalist who performs only the most crucial activities before returning to your thoughts?
Yeah, I definitely think so. I almost exclusively do things that I need to do, not really things that I necessarily want to do. So I'll go out because I want to buy food because I like not starving, and I'll do things like go to appointments, but for example, I wouldn't even know my own city because I have like just no very little used to going outside and doing whatever else. It's not that I'm like agoraphobic or anything like that. Simply, I just don't have interest in it. And the same goes for most other things in my life, I think. I just, yeah, I don't have much. My room is pretty much empty. I don't have any pictures on the wall because I don't see a reason to it. I have only the things that I need, and I only really do the things that I need to do. And
Um,
that's basically it.
so as far as the returning to your thoughts, are there activities that correlate more closely to being in your thoughts that you do like to participate in or you do like to do? I know a lot of schizoids like to read. Many like to watch types of media that correlate with some of their maybe internal thoughts or worlds. Would you describe anything like that in your life?
I used to read a lot. I don't really do it anymore that much.
Mhm.
I do definitely consume some media, definitely in that direction. Like
I
media's
mean, your
like
avatar, right?
uh oh actually I don't really watch much anime anymore, but
It's an
I
old
used to.
avatar.
But I used to have interest in it, but I kinda mostly lost it. I don't think I've watched an anime in the last year or so just because yeah, everything gets boring eventually, unfortunately. Um
Hmm.
Videos about abstract topics like that I absolutely do about psychology, philosophy, science. Not really because I have an interest in it necessarily on like a deeper level. I don't think
Mhm.
I would be interested in those things if I really like did them more actively, but it's interesting because it gives me food for thought and food to think about, things to think about really.
And that's the only thing that seems to provide you any kind of solace.
Um, Maybe that's the only thing,
Oh, but
but
one of the few things.
yeah, yeah.
Sorry, I misworded that. Um, okay. Is your immediate environment somewhat neglected?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I I only do the things that I need to do. So anything that doesn't make me directly uncomfortable, I will put off until I really have to do it.
Hmm.
So I'm really uncomfortable. I don't know. I'm for example actually a pretty cleanly person. Like I don't like I take care of my bodily hygiene because I dislike smelling and stuff like that, but I will do anything that doesn't really bother me, even if that's something that people consider to be something that you should do is something that I just kind of don't like. I don't care if my room is like it's messy or dirty in ways that don't bother me particularly, and I just don't really care about it much. And
So you would say it's pretty disorganized?
I wouldn't even call it disorganized because it's so few things
Hmm.
that I have that it's not too hard to organize them. It just they're I just don't take good care of it, I would say, more than anything.
Like it just collects dust?
Yeah, for example.
Okay. That's understandable. Okay. Next question. Do you oscillate between meaning and despair, or do you feel consistently empty or disassociated?
Uh, I wouldn't say that I oscillate between meaning and despair. I don't think I have much of a feeling of meaning in anything.
Mhm.
So there wouldn't be much I can oscillate between. I do sometimes oscillate between neutrality and despair,
Hmm.
but that happens rarely. I would say mostly it's neutrality with a bit of despair sprinkled in every now and then. Um, but most of the time, yeah, it's just
So would
being
you say
dissociated and
it's a more of a consistent, like, low grade state of
yeah,
empty?
exactly. Everything is kind of just like gray. It just kind of exists, and it's very much like just unimportant, pretty much.
Hmm. Interesting, interesting. Because I like to get these answers, and then well, you'll see. It's just interesting to talk about a little bit further. I'm
Mhm.
learning a lot right now. Thank you. Do important thoughts slip out of the sides of your mental workspace? Do you feel impulsive or dysregulated?
I don't know if thoughts slip out of my mental workspace. I do tend to just to stack up different thoughts on top of each other and forget about the thought I had just recently had. So the trains just keep on going and I forgot where they came from.
Yes, yes. My
And I
life
guess
as
that
well.
can be described like that. Yeah.
Hmm.
Outside of that, I mean, if I have to, really have to, I can very much be focused and don't really feel like anything is like lost or anything. I just don't usually have to, and it's just not my natural way of thinking unless I, need to.
Does it feel dysregulated to be this way, or does it just feel like a natural state?
For me, it feels pretty much natural. I'm aware that it's like kind of dysregulated compared to the norm, but it doesn't feel unnatural to me at all.
Interesting. Okay.
I wouldn't say I'm impulsive either,
Hmm.
honestly, but I do tend to be like I tend to be obsessive when there's things that do interest me, which happens very, very rarely because most things to me are rather uninteresting. But when I do find something that is in some way like sparks my interest, I tend to get very, very focused on that because it's like this little spark in the darkness, and I get very, very focused on it.
Like a moth.
And yeah, exactly, like a moth to the flame, exactly. And um, at that point, I do become not impulsive, but very obsessive towards it. And then usually after a very short time, it goes away and I go back to the normal because nothing really lasts. Nothing really like stays interesting. It's just like interesting for a while and then it goes away. And that can be anything. That can be
Yeah, I was going to ask, can you give me an
activities.
example of a recent thing?
Uh,
If it, it doesn't have to be super recent, just an
yeah,
example.
I mean, for example, I would say like meeting someone, and I can find like I don't have much interest in interpersonal things, but I can have some interest in people as like a concept, the same way that someone would be interested in Caesar or something, like some historical figure, finding out about them, like not really in the sense of like I want to do things with you, but I want to learn about you. That can be something that sometimes interests me. And
I've heard that
usually,
before.
yeah, usually that can definitely like lead to me becoming very, very interested in someone and then like wanting to know everything about them and being like very much obsessive. I need to like know more about this person. And then after, I don't know, a week or so of talking to them, I lose all interest. I know enough about you now and goodbye. That's it.
It's funny because this very activity you're doing could be one of those things, correct? Something you're interested
Not
in doing
really
that you might
actually.
lose interest in?
I mean, I don't know if I would want to do an interview necessarily again, but this one is different in the sense that I'm not really doing it because I have much of an interest in, but rather that I find it to be possibly useful, I guess, which is different from like interest in that sense.
I know it's hard to pry out the word meaningful out of a schizoid.
Yeah, I
It's
guess that's roughly what I'm trying to
yeah, yeah,
say.
no, but
Yeah,
absolutely.
something
But
of the sort.
that word just feels kind of icky for some reason for
Exactly.
many of us. So that's perfectly understandable. Do you swap between experiencing individuals, objects, or concepts as all good or all bad? Not asking about the intensity or badness of goodness, but like, do you tend to get like an experience or have an object relation to it becomes categorical? Like, okay, so this type of thing is not good or it is good.
It depends. I think for most things, I do have pretty normal whole object relations.
Mhm.
Like when I can see a person, I can see that person is like having good traits and bad traits, and as having things that are like good about them that they're good at, or things that they're bad at. Like I can definitely see nuance in people and most things, I think, on like in a general level. But sometimes in terms of concept, I definitely sometimes lack that ability and definitely see things as like all bad or all good. Like for example, even though I can look at most individual people as like complicated beings that have good and bad traits to them from my perspective, I oftentimes look at like humans as a concept as something that's very, very bad, like just categorically bad.
Mhm.
And I hate it. I can't like I think it's just a horrible thing. Humans are bad. Not even humanity, just the concept of humans.
Mhm.
And
Would you apply that to
so
all sentient life,
uh,
or just humans for now, since you
I
haven't met
mean, for
any
now, just human.
aliens?
I have who knows? Maybe they're different. Probably not though.
That's funny. No, if I laugh, it's only because I'm relating to what you're saying. It's just to make sure you understand that.
Yeah, should be.
It's like a relatable thing. Like just to hear you say some of these things, it feels good to be honest. But
All right, I'll
um,
take it as such then.
no, yeah, yeah, take it as a positive. That's how I kind of respond to the discomfort of relatability sometimes. Are the people around you usually competent or incompetent? How would you describe people around you in general?
That's difficult because I don't really have people around me, which makes that question problematic. I don't work. I am on disability, so I really am surrounded by almost no one. So I guess I have to answer this in like a more general sense, like the people I met in my life or I've been
Or
around.
also the isolation in and of itself, if it's fueled by any thoughts of others being so incompetent, you rather not being around them. That kind of thing. But anyway, just in
Um,
case. I'm not saying that's the case, but
yeah.
yeah, but to include that in your thoughts.
Mm. I do think people can be competent, absolutely. Um, I do oftentimes see people as like, oh, you're like competent at the thing you're doing. What I definitely don't think is that people are aware of how competent they are. Like a lot of people like have very, very low introspection. So they'll think they know everything about something, but they have absolutely no idea what they're talking about, and they're completely like confident that what they're saying is completely correct, and they have no idea that they're not, and they have very little introspection about that.
Mhm.
And that is oftentimes something that I see people do where they're competent in one thing, but they'll do something else and assume they're competent in it even though they're not. So
They'll project competence in one thing onto a variety of
yeah,
things.
exactly, exactly. But I do think most people are competent in some things and incompetent in a lot of things. I mean, but that's the
So,
thing about humans. We
so,
have strengths and weaknesses.
but, considering your previous statement, would you say that most humans are incompetent at being humans?
I mean, compared to me, they're probably better at being humans, to be honest. But
Or maybe humans is the issue, not so much the competency of
yeah,
being human.
yeah, very much so.
I
I
see. I
think
see
that's
the
more
difference for
accurate.
you. Okay, I see. I was kind of trying to pinpoint that a little bit. I was curious. Are you usually competent or incompetent? How do you consider yourself?
I am theoretically competent, but not practically in most things.
Hmm.
Like, I'm sure I could become like quite competent in many, many different things, but I'm not really. Because to be competent, you need to actually put in like a lot of work. You need to practice. You
Practice,
need to
yes.
do, get education or whatever it is. You need to be good at it, but it takes work. And for me, most of the time, that work is something that I don't feel like makes sense to really do because I don't feel like I get anything out of it.
Mm.
I guess there's some things I'm definitely competent in, but not a lot of things. I could be, I guess.
Would you describe anything as yourself being incompetent at anything specific?
Actually doing things. I mean, that's a skill, I guess, which I don't really have.
Okay. So the volition, you're incompetent
Yeah, exactly. I'm very incompetent
in
at
volition.
volition.
Yeah. Okay. Does being instructed, corrected, or informed by those closest to you bring sensations of safety or sensations of discomfort? I know you say you don't have a lot of people close to you, but those that are around, or whether in the past or in the present, does it make you uncomfortable when they instruct you on what to do?
I guess it depends on how much I trust them to be knowing what they're talking about. Like if I feel like they're good at the thing they are like instructing or criticizing me about, then I don't think it makes me uncomfortable. Quite the opposite, because like it's useful. I can use it to get better at whatever it is they're instructing me in.
Hmm.
When I don't have trust in their ability to be good at this and to know how to instruct me and to know um, how to tell me about things, then I tend to definitely get uncomfortable by it because I I feel like I have to tell them that like I don't want to listen to you because I don't trust you in it, and I know they will get emotional about it, and I know they will like in some way react negatively and try to keep doing it and like no, I know you need to do it like this. I'm like no, I don't want to, thank you. And it oftentimes ends up being very awkward, and do think that will generally make me uncomfortable. Yeah.
Oh, so the persistence can make you uncomfortable
Yeah, exactly.
once you proclaim otherwise that you
Yeah.
don't need help. Okay. Um, can you feel the emotions of others, or do you experience them as obstacles or puppets?
And I say both because I definitely do experience the emotion of others, not very strongly, but I do have a lot of affective empathy, which can be
Oh,
kind
that's
of
interesting.
problematic.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
that's
know it's not very
interesting because it's
common,
not common.
apparently.
Yeah, be
Yeah.
described that way.
Um, it used to be way stronger, but over time it got more dulled, which I think is mostly because, well, my emotions in general got more dulled, which, yeah, will include emotions I feel through empathy. Yeah, I definitely do have the ability to feel other people's emotions, or at least my brain has the ability to simulate
So
what other people
do
are
you see them
currently
as
feeling.
obstacles or puppets, or do you just see them
Oftentimes,
as?
absolutely, yeah, absolutely. It can be very, very awkward because it's difficult to talk to them on like a more like cognitive or physical level because you have to try to get past all the emotions and stuff like that, which gets really, really difficult because if you're trying to like just talk about something, solve a problem, then and they're just like oh, I feel hurt by what you're saying, so I will ignore what you're actually saying to me, and then it gets all
Especially,
messy and it's not fun.
especially when that hurt comes from a place of misunderstanding and misattributing intent, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, I've discussed it a lot of times, but that's a very painful thing for a Zoid to oftentimes experience is being misattributed or misunderstood, like while attempting to convey something. That's something that's not fun. Is empathizing easier with individuals, fictional characters, or groups of people?
I think probably easiest with okay, no. When in terms of empathy, like actual effective empathy, I would say absolutely with individuals. Especially when I can like the closer I am to them, like in front of me, it's easier for me for that to happen. Like I don't do it very actively. Than for someone I don't know I see on a TV screen or something like that. Um, fictional characters I can also empathize with, but usually less. And groups I have no idea about. Like I don't think I've ever empathized about like with a group as a whole. When it comes to relating to, which I is it kind of meant like that, or is it like purely meant in terms of effective empathy?
I think when, in regards to empathizing, it could be either, it's just whatever the person I'm asking the question decides to share. So, like I have Zoids that are more cognitive empathy, 100%, others that are a little mix. But in relation to those things, individuals, fictional characters, or groups, or categories of people, you get me? Like maybe a nation, a tribe, a people, humanity, so on and so forth.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. No matter what, like I cannot either empathize or relate to groups of people, whether I'm part of them or not. That's something that just like it doesn't make sense to me. Like I don't feel like I'm part of them. I don't feel like I can empathize with like a group in that way. Um, and I do tend to relate a bit more usually with fictional characters than with real characters, but I relate very little to both. In fictional characters, I have like a feeling of they're like less alien to me than humans because they're not like humans. They're written in a very specific way to be a very specific character, and that usually is easier for me to deal with than
Hmm.
the greater complexity that real humans have. So that makes it easier usually to relate, but it's not a big difference most cases. It's very unrelatable to me.
Do you more often share others' pain or enjoy it?
100% pain. It's like pain is by far the most strong thing I get through sharing. Um, I don't really enjoy it, like almost like I don't really get positive emotions in that way. It's really pain is by far the most prevalent.
No, but what I'm saying is that do you find enjoyment in others' pain at all?
Oh, enjoyment out of pain.
Yeah, yeah. Do you enjoy or share others' pain? That's the kind of the question.
I share it through empathy, obviously. I don't
Okay.
want to because it's painful, but
Okay. Yes. Yes.
I
Okay.
don't usually enjoy other people's pain.
Okay. Yeah. Do you more often share others' joy or lament it?
That's a good question. I can sometimes share other people's joy. It's very, very rare. I don't know if I would even call it other people's joy. I can like just be glad that like something is good, I guess. But it's not very strong. I don't think I ever lament other people's joy whatsoever. Like I for the most part I'm indifferent to it, but very rarely it comes through that I feel like kinda good about it to like a very like dull degree, I
And I
guess.
think lament also means like envy, you know?
Oh, I see. Yeah, sorry, English is not my native language.
No, no, lament is like you're sad about their joy. And it could be that the sadness can come from a variety of places, whether it's,
Oh, I
jealousy
see.
or otherwise, lamenting it in any capacity.
There is a certain level of, yeah, like jealousy. Yeah. I would oftentimes, like, not oftentimes, but sometimes I do feel like I would like to experience what it is to be human, or at least what usually is to be human, and to feel the happiness that other people feel for a lot of things. But oftentimes also I'm pretty glad that that I don't have to deal with it. That I'm more simple in that regard, I guess.
Yeah, no cons, no pros, no pros, no cons, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I can imagine. Okay. Is empathizing with yourself easier via your individual struggles or through art, philosophy, and politics?
Oh, I mean, I think definitely through things like art, philosophy, politics, generally more so. Yeah. Especially art, for sure.
Do you want to talk a little bit about art? Or
Uh, I don't have that much to talk about in that regard. I'm not like
because you
literally
said
an artistic
especially
person.
art, so I was curious as to why.
It's more like art tends to help me to empathize with myself a bit more in like this kind of abstract way. Like I
Consuming or
can,
producing?
or consuming. I don't have the motivation to actually produce it. I'd like to have the motivation for that, but it's just
Yeah,
not really there.
consuming it then. Yeah.
Yeah, art, music a lot, but also like drawings or whatever, do help me like feel things, like feel myself a bit more, if it makes sense.
Yes.
Not to a very strong degree, but definitely like to this degree of like I can at least feel it in like this kind of third person thing. And in that sense, it definitely helps. And um, that's definitely a thing. I don't know about philosophy and politics that much. Um, but that also definitely still more than my individual struggles or anything like that, I think.
Are you more of a subject who deserves happiness, an obstacle slash puppet, or a malevolent entity which must be defeated? How do you consider yourself?
I don't think I would say I deserve happiness. I don't think I don't deserve it either. I don't really think in these kind of concepts of deserving or anything like that.
Hmm.
I have what I have. Other people have what they have. And that's basically just it. I don't think I'm a malevolent entity either. So, I mean, a puppet is probably a pretty good way of putting it. Like, I just kinda exist, and in a way, I'm like just doing what I'm doing kind of automatically without really much like ability to really control that because I feel like I'm just like kind of observing the whole thing rather than like being directly in control in it. And oftentimes I do feel like I'm like making it harder for myself,
Hmm.
uh, if that makes sense. So I guess obstacle also to a degree would would be yeah would be accurate.
Are you isolated? If so, how?
Oh yeah, very much so. I live by myself. I don't have a job. I don't really have friends. I almost exclusively interact with like people on the internet, and when I say that, I talk to like two people or something like that. So yeah, very much so. And I don't think I would want to be any other way, honestly.
Do you, well, that brings us to the next question. Do you desire relationships? If not, why?
I would like to desire relationships, but I don't. I think that's the best way to put it. I feel like relationships for me are not useful. They don't bring me anything. They bring me a lot of work, but they don't really bring me anything good, like any pleasure or whatever. But I do feel like I'd like to enjoy them. I can see other people having like relationships and I can think like, oh, I'd like to be able to enjoy this as much as you are, but fundamentally I'm not. And I tried a lot to like, try like, hey, maybe I have to find the right person or something like that, and then I'll enjoy it. But no matter what, it was basically just no. I don't really want this. So in that sense, I don't really have a desire for it because there is nothing there that would be desirable for me. But I do like it, and I would like to. Really. That's what I'd say.
Do you feel like there is a seemingly impenetrable communication barrier or difference in values preventing others from relating to you?
Oh yeah, 100%.
Could you describe that barrier?
It feels like I'm like speaking a different language, like not literally, but in the sense that like the concepts and frameworks that I use are not the same that the other person uses. And I understand their framework and can try to translate it into theirs, but they don't understand mine. So it's always this very one-sided thing, thanks to that, which is, yeah, makes it very difficult to have like more, like a proper conversation, like a conversation that's on the same level, really.
Hmm. Would you mind an example in which that's occurred that you can recollect? A conversation you were having with somebody and then it kind of went off the rails for them, but you found yourself kind of holding the bag.
I can't think of anything specific right now, but for example, I would have conversations with my parents and I would like just talk to them and explain things to them, and no matter what, they wouldn't be able to understand my what I'm saying, like what I'm experiencing, and to them it just doesn't make sense. Like it's this, just do the thing, you're not enjoying things, just do the thing. And I'm
Would
like,
you
okay, but
say
that
that
doesn't make me enjoy it.
you make an attempt with your tool set, you try to make an attempt to explain it and it's just not getting through?
Yeah, exactly. And no matter how I try to explain it, like some people can understand it in like this abstract way that I can like explain like to them like, okay, I can't tell them it's blue, but I can tell them it's the color of water and they can like roughly get an idea of like
I like
the
that.
properties of it,
Yes. Yeah.
but they cannot really truly understand it. That's how it feels.
Mm, okay. So yeah, it's like looking at the sky when it's blue, but to you it's red, and you're telling him the sky looks like a rose, right?
Yeah, exactly,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah. And I mean, they're not going to necessarily mean like they're going to just wonder what does that even mean? It looks like a rose. Um, Okay, okay. What can potential friends or partners change about their behavior or expectations to help you feel more comfortable pursuing a relationship? Or not even just friends or partners, just people in your environment that you do or have come across. What is it that they could reasonably do that would probably make you more comfortable? And don't think about like, is it realistic or not realistic? Just kind of just your own thought on like what would be nice.
It's a good question. I would have to think a bit about what that would even entail because it's hard for me to say anything about like relationships other than well I don't get anything from it, so I would have to think like what would they have to do for me to get anything from that, and that's kind of not really something I can directly answer,
Still
but
a
I guess
mystery at the moment.
yeah, I mean the easiest thing if I for example try to spend more time with people because I felt like it was good for my mental health, then I could do that even though it would be not something I truly like want or that's enjoyable for me, but I know it's going to be good in the long term. And in that case, I mean, I would want them to be giving me space more than anything. Like have there's no like pressure. Like I can
Expectation?
expectations exactly. Like no expectations to have to be a certain way, to have to do a certain way. I can retreat out of it if I want to. I don't have to like constantly be available. I
Escape
don't have to
hatch
constantly be there.
available.
Yeah, and I can like just be like, I don't want to right now. I want to like not do this right now. Just be able to do that. That I think would make it much easier because otherwise the relationships feels very, very crushing almost like a constant like pressure, and that
So,
definitely would be a big obstacle.
so I'm just curious. Like an example would be, say you're in a social setting of some kind that you have decided to actively participate in, and then during that said event, you decide, I need to walk away from the middle of this social activity and hope that nobody tells me anything. So if, say, you lived in a world in which you could say, I'm exiting the social activity, and everyone just goes, oh, that's reasonable, and then they continue about their business, would that be helpful?
That would be so much easier. Yeah, absolutely. Like feeling like I don't have to like commit to it. Like I have to go to the social activity and then I have to stay there even if I hate it or even if I just don't want to right now. That
Mhm.
makes it so much more obnoxious to me. Instead, I can just say like, oh yeah, let me just leave or even just take a break or whatever and
Yeah.
just like say, I don't have to do this. Like I'm here out of my own volition. There's no like pressure on me to be right here even if I don't want to do a certain thing even if I don't want to,
Would you say
to be a certain way.
under conditions like that, would they increase the possibility of you wanting to participate in said activity more than once?
If I had a reason to do it the first time, yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Okay. So if the reason continues,
Yeah, exactly.
because otherwise, that factor I just explained might be a factor that would make you not want to continue doing that
Yeah,
activity
yeah,
another time in the future.
absolutely. That'll
Uh,
just make me go like, okay, I'll never do this again. No thanks.
yeah, exactly. Especially activities that have more potential for such an occurrence than activities that don't, right? Um,
Yeah, and those I tend to avoid just from the beginning usually.
yeah, yeah, I totally understand that one. Like, I'm not a big fan myself of going to, like, say, events in which there's seating that you can't get away from, or places where you can't just leave. So you can't just get up and move away. Like, say, somebody going to church or something. It's not as easy. It's not something as easy for you to just get up and walk out in the middle of a parishioner's or priest or whatever's sermon.
Yeah, exactly.
There's always questions and looks and everything else, and there's a lot of activities that can sometimes be like that. What would the ideal relationship look like? I know that's going to be rough for you. I mean, like, do you have? That's another question too, in relation to that, because if you do have an ideal relationship, is if you have internal or fantasies of relationships, and what they would look like. Because I know a lot of schizoids have relationships with imaginary versions of things.
Yeah, I don't know if I would call them relationships necessarily, but I do have, yeah, I definitely do have like, I guess like fantasies as a form of replacement for any real relationships. Yeah.
Mhm.
Um, That's a tough one because when I think about like in fantasy, it doesn't tend to be very long. There doesn't tend to be any like the intricacies that I would have in the real world, right? It wouldn't be, there's like no boringness because, no boring just like existing with the other person in a relationship, just like, going to work together or cohabiting or anything like that because that's boring. And in my fantasies, I'm not going to do boring things. But I mean, on an interpersonal level, I mean, the same thing. They'd have to give me space, obviously. I have to feel like I can be there if I want to and not if I'm not.
So autonomy is
And
incredibly important.
yeah, exactly, definitely. And on a, I mean, that would have to be compatible with me on a, I'd have to go on a very big tangent to explain what exactly would mean for someone to be compatible with me. So maybe that's a bit too much here,
Oh, okay.
but
No, that's fine. If you that could be something you can discuss with whoever you decide to ever discuss it with, whether it's me or anybody else on the server. But I understand that would. But this is the part which you can go a little, even if it relates to that, if you'd like, where you can just ramble as much as you want for the next small chunk of time. And that is this. What is the nature of your inner landscape, fantasy life, or etc.? What does the inside of Faye look like to the best of your ability to kind of explain in your own kind of language? And just, I'll talk back. We'll talk about it. Like, we'll go back and forth, whatever.
sure. So, I mean, there's multiple parts to what I would call fantasy. There is the more active card, so that usually for me means I actually try to focus on it and actively like immerse myself in it,
Hmm.
which usually I do. I lay down my bed, and usually late at night and just like just retreat in my head and retreat into fantasy, but in a very active way. In that case, it's all kind of things. It's things I like to experience, usually things I haven't experienced yet, so I can imagine the experience to be actually enjoyable, even though I probably wouldn't enjoy it that much, or at least not for very long if I actually was going to do it. It can be a lot of things. Like it can be
Do you have to imagine enjoyment in that kind of place, or
to a degree, yeah.
Do you feel some like to a degree, like
I
more
do
so
feel
than
for
if you say would have
something.
participated in the actual activity?
I feel like I don't get burned out from things as much in fantasy. In the real world, I get burned out from anything that like is interesting to me very, very quickly. So, which doesn't seem to happen in fantasy at all. So I can do similar things quite a lot without it getting necessarily boring. I
What
do have to kind of simulate like enjoyment, yeah. I tend to even simulate like feelings and stuff in my fantasies. Like I'll actually feel things like I fall in love or something like that. I that's something that's very, very
are you
foreign to me and doesn't
simulating,
really happen.
or is there some portion of you tapping into some suppressed part of the self and actually feeling these things? But obviously, since you can't like, since there's that disconnect, maybe it doesn't. It's too much of a reach to say you're feeling it, but
Honestly, that the way you've been describing that is pretty accurate, I think. Yeah, it's definitely like kind of real. It's not just like imagining it. It's not like just a purely imagination. It's
intellectual.
it's
It's
like
not just an
definitely I'm
intellectual
feeling
activity.
exactly like there's some underlying emotions definitely like do take place. Absolutely. Um, definitely not to the same like degree that other people have it, I think, in real life, but definitely yeah, I do think it makes me like feel some things, even if it's very dull. And I exaggerate it, right? I imagine myself being like actually in love and act in my fantasies as if I'm actually in love, even though it doesn't quite feel like that, but there's some feeling definitely like there, even if it's suppressed. Yeah.
Well, what are some of these, if you can get a little more concrete, as far as what it looks like or the themes and such of that landscape? Like, what are the aesthetics, I guess, of that lands of those landscapes? Whether they're all different or they constantly change or there's constancy of some kind. But what what sort of aesthetic would you describe? I would say.
There's differences. I mean, It's oftentimes some kind of like adventure of some kind, and usually it involves some kind of like fighting. I like fighting
So
in
sword and
general.
sorcery, are we talking?
Oh yeah, yeah, something like that, for example. I know it's kind of cliche, but
No,
like,
no, it's fine. It's perfectly fine.
um, so that I guess tends to be a thing. Um, very rarely there's like omnipotence of some kind, but that's rare. Like, usually it's quite the opposite because I like the idea of like not
Cha you
actually.
like challenges?
Yeah, exactly. Underdog story, that kind of thing.
Yeah, of course.
Um, well, of course, it's fantasy, so even though these challenges exist, I will always overcome them, which is very comfortable.
Okay.
Um,
Unlike my own,
so
just in my own, sometimes I like to experience failure. It's interesting, I know. That's just
that
me.
is actually something that to a degree also definitely happens, yeah. I mean, again, like I do try to experience emotions, and that does include emotions generally seen as negative.
Hmm.
So I do oftentimes like have things like happen that are sad, like or like that are like tragic or something like that. Um, also like to experience that emotion at least in like in fantasy. Um, so it's not always like just good things. So that oftentimes happen. In fact, it's like a pretty consistent theme actually that like a lot of really bad things happen because I just think that's really interesting.
But then the struggle of overcoming such bad things
Mm,
is what's
not
interesting.
even just overcoming it, also like just existing despite the bad things, you know? Like
Hmm.
like I'll have stories where I'm like significantly traumatized by something, just like keep going, and see what happens from that, see what, how I'll act differently because of that and
Do you
you
write
know,
any of these down, or do you just keep them inside?
never, just mad.
It's all internal.
Yeah.
And
I
is there constancy or consistency, or is it like a new one every time?
I always try to keep it consistent, but I never can. So it's usually like for a few days. So the amount of how much I fantasize very much fluctuates significantly. So there's times where I'll do it a lot, and there's times where I don't do it for months. At least in this kind of fantasizing.
Mm.
I mean not months, but weeks at least. And usually I'll try to keep a consistent theme, but the same story usually only goes on for like a day or two, maybe three, and then I'll go for something else, or I'll have forgotten about it and
Mm.
just have to start anew. So it's very much not like a consistent fictional universe or something like
Well,
that.
but no, I know. Some people have it that way though, and so that's why I like to ask. But would you say there is a consistency when it comes to themes?
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely,
so there's
absolutely.
themes that you like to that find are you find comfortable or enjoyable that you go back to often.
Yeah, it's usually like it's almost like a very similar story. Well, not quite. There's definitely differences, but it almost always includes like one, maybe two or three other characters, but usually only one. Very rarely even just two. So that's usually like a very much a one-on-one kind of thing
Hmm.
where only one other character exists. And that's definitely a theme. And then usually, something, quite a common theme is that it's not in this world or whatever,
Yeah.
that it's like I die and I get reborn in another world or something like that. I know that's a
Oh,
huge
the
trope, but it's just so
classic
useful. It's such a
isekai,
useful,
right?
yeah, it's such a useful
Isekai.
storytelling trope. I don't have to
Hey.
think about the background or anything like that
No,
because
no,
it's like
because you want to just get to the fun
very easy.
part.
Exactly,
You want to
exactly.
get to the
And
fun part. Yeah, I totally understand that.
um, so that's a very typical thing. And then like usually like there's something that some goal to work towards, some useful goal that I have a reason to work towards. And that then I work towards that goal and things happen that are
And for some reason, those
interesting.
goals inside that internal world just feel more motivating than any goals outside of it. Yes.
Absolutely. I don't have many goals outside of it that I really care about. I think that's a big reason why I do that in fantasy, because in fantasy I can actually, have goals, and in fantasy I can make them meaningful and important because I can determine, I want them to be. And then in the real world, it's just all, I don't really care. It's just all unimportant.
The last thing, I wanted your opinion, whether it's good or bad or whatever, because I just want transparency. What are your thoughts on the server, the project, the channel, whatever else? What do you have any thoughts you want to share for the people listening that are probably watching this?
I mean, it's honestly really positive. I'm not watching the channel actually that much. It's very much a every now and then thing that I actually sit down and watch the videos.
Mhm.
But every time I do find
How
it
dare
very, very
you? No, I'm just
interesting.
kidding.
Yeah, I do find it interesting and it's relatable. That's like the biggest thing. Like I can like see like, oh, like this experience is something that kind of like is known to me. It's not like completely alien like most like if I was gonna watch like a vlog from someone, it's just like their entire experience. It's like so alien to me. Just hearing someone talk about the problems, the problems they have and the whole schizoid thing is very much like it's just nice. It's just like yeah, it makes me feel less alienated, I guess. And I mean
Yeah,
I'm on the
it's like
server
a
quite a lot.
shared value system being
Yeah,
conveyed, right?
yeah.
Or a
And
relatable sense of experience or reality and such.
a similar framework really of reality, yeah.
I don't know. I feel like it works for a positively reinforcing reality check for a lot of people so that they
Yeah,
don't,
pretty much.
because a lot of us grew up thinking we might be insane or crazy or something because of this lack of connection and inability to enjoy things the same way as others do for the same reasons.
Yeah,
So,
I definitely did. Yeah.
yeah,
I definitely
exactly.
grew up
But
feeling like I'm an alien. I'm like something is completely wrong with my brain. I guess it's kind of true, but in
no,
a
it's
different
not
way than
true.
I thought as a
I
child.
will have to adamantly disagree with that part at least. There's nothing wrong with your brain. But that's just me.
All right, all right.
But there's something wrong perhaps with some of our expressions of how we adapted to being in an environment that feels so highly incompatible to us.
Yeah,
I would say there's definitely stuff in there, but the brain itself is well, not wrong. If there's for me, I think that's a poor choice of words. Well, thank you. I do want to say also thanks to anybody watching. If you would like these sort of interviews, I want to keep doing them. I want to ask more Zoids to get on, ask the same questions, and just start figuring some of this stuff out relating to it and everything else. Anything I gather here or learn from in these conversations is, stuff I'm going to take into consideration in mind, especially when I keep working with others to develop more ideas on how it is that we can help schizoids more actively and advocate for anything that might be helpful because life can be a little difficult for us in many regards. If you do like all this, like I said, do Patreon. That's useful. Donate there. PayPal, whatever. Same with if you don't like you don't like a regular currency, I'll take crypto. It's linked. And join me on any future streams or whatever else. Sub, and what's the other thing? The bell. Yeah, do the bell. If you haven't done the bell, do the bell because that actually tells you when I post shit. All right, that's about it. Thanks a lot, Faye.
yeah, you're welcome. Thanks for the interview.